We gaan weer beginnen en Gini van Cello Exchange en de reactorpanel zal haar verhaal vertellen van het wereldwijd zadelpassen. Oh, wow.
Hi,
Hello.
I'm Ginny and I'm from England. So apologies for the fact that it's all going to be in English because I haven't understood a word of anything that's come on so far.
Sorry.
So first of all, what I'm going to talk to you about today is the flat, the wide and the fat. So as well as doing reactor panel, which we're going to look at later, we also are pretty well known for fitting these flat, wide, short little creatures known as the British native pony. And over the years we've had different shapes of horses come through because now we're riding horses that we previously didn't, like the carriage horses and the natives that were predominantly pack animals and just led, you know, for like a Highland pony, for example, is used for carrying deer, or it was, and now people show them. So I'm going to talk about that type of horse. So first of all, what we're going to talk about is about sometimes things that pick the position of the saddle, basically, and with horses of a very high condition score, which I think is a very polite way of saying it, sometimes it can be difficult to find the last rib. So obviously the position of the saddle should be positioned just behind the scapula and not over the last rib on a traditional. So when you've got a horse that has a lot of fat over the shoulder and a lot of fat over the rump, sometimes they can look like they've got quite a dipped back because you've got lots of fat here, lots of fat here, and they don't carry as much through the saddle area. So I've actually had people contact me before, and I do advise a lot of saddle fitters, and they say, what have you got to fit this dippy backed Highland? Well, it's not a dippy backed Highland, it's just a fat one. So what we're talking about is we get what we call a loaded shoulder. Now this can push the saddle further back. If they're loaded here, it can sort of bring the croup in, but at the end of the day, that's the length of space. And as I say, it can be very, very difficult to find on one of these, of the fatter horses. So let's talk about the fundamentals of saddle fit. So basically, static assessment with rider's weight. How much use is a static assessment? We're not going to be sitting on our horses and not moving anywhere. And as we all know, a horse's back when a horse moves is a completely different shape to a horse that's standing. Now it's even more pronounced on a horse that's carrying a little bit extra, because what you get is something that looks like that, because you've got the fat here, down. But then if you backlift that horse, what you'll find, what it does is it does come through and lift the back. So what we're looking at is we're looking at how do we now assess the fat horse when it's moving as opposed to when they're standing. So horses basically have very, very different shapes, and it all depends on the amount of muscle. I mean, if you see these two, so what we've got here, we've got a horse here that's quite well muscled. He's clearly using his top line, because as you can see that there's no pendulous belly, unlike this one, dear Matilda. I've used her picture for years, and she's a Frisian cross cob, so she's naturally got this high stance from the Frisian, but she's also got all the extra bits from the cob. So what I've seen saddle makers do is they'll go with the tree. Thank you very much, Kate, for providing me with the tree. And this, they put it on the horse's back. So, what does it look like? There's no rider's weight. In fact, there's no weight at all. And what they're fitting is a horse that's shaped like this, opposed to the horse. So they're fitting this, which is not what we want. We want to fit this. So, when you're looking at something like that, invariably what happens when people order saddles and they do that, then the saddle ends up too wide. And that brings me on to the next thing, templates. Bianca did a really interesting study, didn't you, Bianca? Was it last year or was it the year before?
The year before.
Yeah. And you contacted me and you said, we've got to talk to the university. And my templates study, which she's, bless her, she's templated hundreds and hundreds of horses. And all her students templated the same horse. But they're all coming out different. So why is that? Well, for a start, if I template a horse, there's only so much that I can push into this flesh. If Dean templates a horse, it's going to look different because he's stronger than I am. I mean, you know, we're both married, we've both been, you know, he trained me, but my templates don't come out like his. So another thing with these white horses, when they have got this big fat covering, is that templates are not accurate. And what Bianca found with all her students is that they were templating the same, two people template the same horse and it's different. And I said, that's fantastic, Bianca, because you've just scientifically proved what I've been telling everybody for 25 years. And so back to these guys, and I always use my leg as an example because I'm not an athlete. So if I template my leg, it's going to look something like this. Yeah? Now actually, you put a rider's weight on my leg, it's going to look more like that. Oh, have I changed my pattern here? There we go. Let's just go back to these two horses. Right, okay. So what I'm saying is when you're templating a horse or you're putting a tree on a horse or you're assessing a saddle when the horse is standing and it's not girthed, you're not seeing the actual true fit. Because when you put a saddle on these horses and you girth it, and I'm talking the really quite fat ones now, it's sort of the equine version of a muffin top. Now we all get that, don't we, ladies? We know what happens when, yeah, I mean, perfect example. But so this is what happens with the horse. So if you put on your templated saddle that looks like that, on your horse it is actually shaped like this, what happens? But when you stand up in the stirrups, the fat displaces, a bit like when I do it on my belt. It doesn't hurt the horse, but what happens is the saddle tips forward and lifts at the back, a bit like a seesaw. And I saw the chiropractor lady saying that they do this. That's why they do this, because of the fact that they're too wide. And the thing is that, I mean, we'd fit some of the top competition horses in the world. And one of the riders on my presentation was Nicola Thorne. Nicola Thorne has been world number one more than once. She's one of the top riders in Europe. She has horses that come into work, do a month's walk work, month's trot, month's canter work, then they go and do smaller rides. They end with a 160. Those horses still, I mean, that's the closest I get to an accurate template if I was to template one of those, because they literally have no fat and a lot of muscle. But that's quite extreme. Most of my customers, their horses look a bit like this or this. So what we've learned over the years is that when you're fitting a horse, for a start you have to watch it when it's moving. So what we do is we look at the angle of the shoulders, and we're fitting the shoulders rather than the fat. And if we do that, then what happens is when you get the rider on, you girth it, it comes down. You sit on it, it comes down, and you ride around, it comes down. So you should put girth up usually, and I always tell people to do that. And then what happens is when you ride, when you stand in the stirrups, the saddle will not drop. So if you've got a saddle that's too wide in front, it drops. Everything has to fit in the right place, because if a saddle is too wide, then the head drops, pins the horse behind the shoulder, because everything's in the wrong place. If you look at this, that is to fit that shape. If it's too wide, it fits there. So this is then going to dig into the horse. So basically, what I'm saying is, when we fit the muscle, we fit the bone structure, we fit for movement, not for static fitting. And then that means you find that people who write to me and say, oh gosh, you know, they write me War and Peace on how terrible all the other saddle fitters have been and how every single saddle they've had moves. And then, you know, we go out there, and despite the fact that they do a 10-metre circle and they're leaning like this, it still does not move, because it's fitting down around the horse. It's not fitting up here because it's too narrow. It's not fitting down there because it's too wide. So basically, that is what I want to tell you about natives. I wasn't sure how much time I had. Am I still okay, Bianca? Do you want me to talk a bit more?
I will look for you. Yeah, it is 2:30. 2 o'clock, sir. So you have a little bit of time.
Cool, cool. So has anybody got any questions for me?
So how would you measure it? Because if you work as a saddle fitter, you do your best, right, to get a saddle
everyone does.
at the right shape or the right form. It's really difficult to start measuring a horse, obviously, when it's moving.
Yeah, you can't. You can't do it. You can't do it. What we do is, because we fit. I mean, I fit 5 to 7 horses a day, all the day, all over the world. And I also, when I go off on a run, I might have 60 visits. I can't get every single saddle I own, because I've got over 500 in stock in the van. So what we do is we look at the angle of the shoulder. So we get a photo of the horse standing square from the side, usually with the owner holding it, so that then we can make some comparison, and we know there's some sort of idea of symmetry, and if you've got a really tall rider or a really short fat rider, you know where you're going, and you can suggest saddles that they can try. And we do both sides, standing square without a saddle, and then up over the rump, up towards the withers, including the withers and the rib cage. So from that, I'm looking at the angle of the shoulder. So my saddles we've got a number range. So if I've got a horse that looks like that, I know it's actually a tight 6 or a soft 5. So I can look at the angle and I can say, okay, so we're going to put 5 and 6 fits in. And then I can look at how well sprung the ribs are. So you're looking at the angle of the ribs. So that tells me which one of our styles because we do different trees. Like, for example, the cadence, you can have one for the cadence cob, we call it, which is the flatter treed one, which is more like that. I mean, if anyone knows anything about Western saddles, that would be a full quarter horse bars. That's a half quarter horse bars. So it's a similar thing as what I'm looking at. And from the side, I can see the position of the girth groove. Although I must admit, nowadays, I'm seeing more and more horses with a forward girth groove. But that's fine, because our saddles, because of the way that Dean designed the saddles originally, because we weren't trained saddle fitters. Dean had a Welsh cob he couldn't fix. He used to breed Welsh cobs. And basically looked at all the saddles on the market. Everyone came out and fitted Dean's horse, and basically nothing would stay still. So he went, okay, so what's wrong? Okay, well, for a start, the girthing's there, and it needs to be here, because otherwise you girth it there, first thing it does is go forward. So we sorted out the girthing. So then the tree's too curved. If you put that on that, how do you do it? Well, what you do, you more flock there, and light through the middle, so you flock the curve out. So that way then, when the horse lifts, it can lift into the saddle rather than into a saddle tree that's like that, which then you get a saddle that rocks, and eventually your horse stops using its back. So what we do is we actually look at the photographs, but you never know until you get there. So what you go there and then you palpate. And this is all to do with experience. My husband's very good at this. And the thing is that basically he can look at a horse and go, okay, that, and it just fits. So what we would do then is you put on what you think, and then you do your usual, weight in, feel down, check for grabbing, because actually what you'll find is it will then sink into the horse. And so what you're looking for is something that does not grab, either at the top because it's too narrow or halfway down because it's too wide. And also you can put weight in front to back and rock them. And if you find that actually that's doing do, then maybe you need the narrow one. So you put that on and try that. And I've been here when Dean trained me, all my years of saddle fitting and learning. You know, I've been there. I've been there to saddle fit all morning going, okay, is it that? Yes, yes. But the thing is, if you don't get grabbing, when you put as much weight you can put into it, you know your tree is a good width. And what you can do then is when you see the rider ride, if the horse has, obviously if it's a very soft horse, you're going to have some displacement when the rider's weight comes in, so it's going to come down. But that's when you flock. And you flock below the points to lift the saddle out of the shoulder. Is that helpful?
Yeah. I was just wondering because we do use templates here, right? So we have the
I know. Everyone does. Everyone does.
But
I write templates because I was a member of the Society of Master Saddlers. I have to do a template.
Yeah.
It means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. If you go and fit a well-fitting saddle, and then you go and look at what you've templated, it's usually about 2 fits different.
Yeah, it's really easy.
Yeah.
So
But
how much different would you measure it compared to your template?
You don't know, all horses are different. It depends on what value, how much of fat that the horse has actually got. And as I say, I always say about the equine muffin top, because I've done horses, and when we train people at our house, I've got my horses. I used to have 8, but unfortunately we lost a 28, 29 and 32-year-old last year, so now we've got 5. And one of those was Dilly, who was one of the last Welsh cobs that Dean bred. And she was like a tank. And you put it, and she's really short-backed, and I mean, you know, the most difficult horse to fit you've ever seen. And she's great for training agents. So what we do is we put the saddle on, girth it up, comes down. And what happens with Dilly when the rider gets on, this is when you get the muffin top, because it bulges out at the front, because she's got such big fatty shoulders, because she's never ridden. She's just a field ornament. Yes?
In the title of the talk, there you say that the topic is the round-ribbed horse.
Yeah, native types.
The native
Yeah.
types. Is there a special, is this talk that you had now, is that especially for round-ribbed horse?
Yeah, that's what Bianca said she wanted me to talk about, because my husband's doing the reactor panel on some sports horses later.
And how do you know that you have a round-ribbed horse?
Just by looking at them. If you compare these, let's get these horses back. I can get this to work. So this is a Welsh cob. I don't know whether any of you are familiar with them. We have lots of those in the UK. And basically you can see here that actually she's actually got a top line. And this one hasn't. This one is just very, very fat. And so the thing is, if I look at those, I'm looking and you can see the shape of the muscle. And actually this is you know, cresty. So basically you look at the pictures and you never know until you get there. I've seen horses that I thought were fat that actually it is all muscle. And we fitted a fantastic horse, didn't we, yesterday? That Percheron cross warm blood, Virtual cross Anglo-Arabian. I've never seen that cross before, and he's beautiful and huge. But actually, he had a reasonable amount of muscle, didn't he? And you just look at this massive great horse, and the angle of his back is like this. And he really was huge because we had to widen the saddle quite a lot because he's changed quite a lot. But you look at him and you think, is this a fat horse? But when we got there, because you're palpating, you can tell. And of course, when you put the saddle on and then you push with your weight and rock, you can then see whether or not, because if it's fat, it'll go in there and in there and in there and in there. If it's not, if you've got it right, because it's sitting in the right place, you won't be able to rock it. So basically, the thing that tells you, you never really know, but you come prepared. You come prepared with, you can see the angle of the ribs. That would tell me if I have a horse like that, if I'm fitting a traditional saddle, it needs the cob cadence rather than the standard, which is there. You're just looking at the angle of the ribs from behind, which is why that photo is very, very useful. And if anyone wants to see what photos I'm talking about, if you go to my YouTube channel, there's a video saying what saddles do I need to send for my saddle fit, and it shows, because it's what I send customers to when they want us to come and see them, and they send me those photos and you can tell. But the answer to that is you never really know until you get there, but you can have a pretty good idea. And those of you that sell saddles that you can adjust, well, that's great because you can just adjust it for where you need to go. If you don't sell adjustable saddles, then I suggest you make an estimated guess because of the angle of the shoulders, and then what you do is you then take out the one you think, one smaller, one larger.
So imagine you have a perfect fitting saddle. How much negative effect can the rider that puts it on the back before riding, how much effect can that still have?
Oh, a lot, a lot. First of all, they have to put it in the right place. I've done saddle fits for people, and the horse has gone lovely, and they've been so pleased they bought the saddle, and the following day, oh, the saddle's going forward. So the first question I asked them, can you just send me a photo of it before when you tack it up without a number on so I can see where they're putting it? Because I would say in cases like that, 99% of the time, it's going forward because they're putting it too far back. And then it'll go forward. If you put it too far forward, it'll go back. Because I don't know if ever you've done, I always put my saddle on by sliding it down my horse's head, and it sort of finds its natural place if it fits. But people don't always do that. Sometimes people just go boom. And in England there's something called showing, where what they're basically they're marked for how beautiful their horse is and how perfect the conformation is. And a lot of these natives, they have this forward girth groove. And some of them have conformation. Another thing that affects where you put the saddle, apart from the girth groove, is the angle of the shoulder. So if you've got a native pony with a shoulder that's like this, which some have, the girth groove is going to be here. So your saddle's almost going to look like it's on the shoulder. And no matter how many times, showing person, you put it there, it's always going to find its place. It's a bit like me putting my belt on up here. It's going to find the right place and get to my wrist. Well, they don't get that. So it can be a little bit challenging. But the thing is that these people, they just want the horse to look like the saddle's in the middle. But with a horse with a shoulder that's upright, and you see that sometimes with some Frisians as well, because the shoulder is like this and girth groove is there, and I'm sorry, but whatever you do, the saddle is going to sit it's going to sit here. If your horse has got a forward girth groove, like this one does, this is quite an upright shoulder. I think this is a trotting horse. But basically, that is where the saddle's going to fit. And they don't want it to sit there because it makes their horse look really long in the back. But at the end of the day, that's how it's going to fit. And then you have a warm blood with a shoulder that's like that. And that looks like the saddle's far back. With the saddles that we sell, we put full girth straps on because we never know what we're going to put it on. So and they're evenly spaced. So most natives with forward girth groove in our saddles will be 1 and 3. And when you girth a horse, what you want is the girth to go straight. If it does that, it's going to go forward. So it's very important that the saddle is correctly made, that actually it does have 4 evenly spaced girth straps. And there's other things for the horses that are 1 and 3, there's other things that we use the back strap for. If it was like a thoroughbred type where it's back, you might go 2 and 4. But they're very unusual nowadays. I find that most of the horses we fit, they do have a forward girth groove, whatever the breed. All the native types, the Arabs. Am I still good for time? Cool. So anyway, any more questions before I finish? No?
When you have the saddle in the front with a horse with a very large shoulder blade,
Yeah.
and you look to the angle of the shoulder blade when he's moving, then you also recognize how the shoulder blade rolls under the saddle.
That's why we place the tree 2 fingers behind the scapula.
Yeah, okay.
And we have different saddles for different types of horses. And let's talk about a really big moving warm blood, for example. If you have the shoulder blade like this, and you fit the saddle then 2 fingers behind, the shoulder does not rotate more than that. And the saddles we fit those type of horses have a front gusset. So what you've got is, if you look at a cadence, for example, you'll see that there's sort of a bulgy bit of panel that sort of comes out the front, and that's because that gives more room for the shoulder, and it also means that we can get more into the panel for a horse with a bit more shape. Bianca touched on horses that have a lack of muscle behind the shoulder as well. I don't fit those. Some horses with a really big wither pocket, thoroughbred types, some warmbloods have a really high wither. I don't fit those in traditional saddles. They have a reactor panel or a big gel panel. There was a British team horse called What a Catch a few years ago, really strangely shaped horse, but he had a big memory foam panel, because the problem is if you're fitting in a flock saddle, you're constantly flocking, and of course you can flock up to 2 fits on. I can flock up to 2 fits on the day and it will work, but within a week it's going to be flat in the wither. So high level endurance horses that are doing over 60k and horses with really, really high withers, I don't touch them unless I can put them in a reactor panel. So I hope that didn't contradict what you said, because I didn't understand what you were saying.
Okay, we
Is that
will
helpful?
later